Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into some really ancient storytelling, looking at a narrative that, well, it expands far beyond the familiar Genesis accounts.
Mm-hmm.
We're plunging into the second book of Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
Seth's line and Cain's curse.
Right.
Think of it as an early exploration of, the ripple effects of that first murder. Our mission today is really to uncover the core insights into how this ancient text portrays the diverging paths of humanity after Abel's death.
Yeah, exactly. We want to look for those key understandings about the origins of, well, virtue and vice within those very first families.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we start? Abel's death, obviously, has just happened.
Yes, and what's fascinating to observe right from the start is the intense emotional landscape this text paints following Abel's death. The canonical Bible mentions the event, of course, but this book really immerses you in the raw grief. Adam, Eve, even Abel's sister Lulua.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack that. This profound sorrow. The source describes them weeping, striking themselves, covered in dust, their clothes torn. I mean, it's a really powerful depiction of devastation.
It is.
What does this level of detailed mourning tell us about the author's perspective on, well, the significance of this first death?
Well, I think it really underscores the magnitude of the loss, doesn't it? And the
Hmm.
complete shattering of their original familial harmony. It definitely sets the stage for understanding the subsequent divisions and the sheer weight of this primal sin.
Hmm.
And what also strikes you is the almost mystical detail around discovering Abel's body, this aroma of sweet spices. It says it's because of his purity.
A fragrant sign of his righteousness, even in
Oh.
death. Interesting. And we get these very specific ages, too. Abel was 15 and a half, Cain 17 and a half.
Right.
It's a small detail, maybe, but it adds a layer of human reality to this ancient tragedy, don't you think?
I agree. It grounds it somehow. Then comes Abel's burial in the Cave of Treasures, a place we'll definitely see again with those sweet spices and myrrh.
And they mourned for 140 days. That's a long
A
time.
very long time.
What might be the significance of such an extended period?
Well, that lengthy mourning period, it emphasizes not only the depth of their grief, but also, I think, the profound impact this event had on their lives. It essentially divided their existence into a before and an after.
Right. Highlighting the severing of innocence, perhaps.
Exactly. And then, in the wake of this intense sorrow, we see Cain's rather decisive actions.
Yes, and this feels like a really pivotal moment. Cain, perhaps feeling the weight of his actions, and certainly estranged from his parents now, marries his sister Lulua, but without their blessing.
The text notes their deep sadness sort of prevented them from intervening.
So what does this act, outside of parental consent, suggest about Cain's state of mind and, the trajectory of his line?
Well, it indicates a departure, doesn't it? A departure from the established order. And perhaps a sense of isolation or even defiance. While, procreation was necessary, doing so without familial and implicitly divine approval, it sets his lineage on a different foundation.
A foundation less connected to the original blessings.
Precisely. One less connected.
He then physically moves away, relocating to the bottom of the mountain. That's a clear geographical separation from the garden's proximity.
It is a very deliberate move.
And it's there that Cain's descendants begin to multiply rapidly. This swift expansion in a place removed from that divine presence, is that portrayed as like a positive growth or something more cautionary?
Given the context of Cain's transgression, I'd say this rapid growth, especially in isolation from the original spiritual center, suggests a society developing along its own, potentially less virtuous path. It definitely raises questions about the nature of progress without that divine guidance.
Right. Okay, so that's Cain's line diverging. Now back to Adam and Eve. After 7 years of separation following Abel's death, they seek to restore hope.
They do?
They pray, they offer a sacrifice, specifically asking for a fair child to comfort them and potentially marry Abel's other sister, Aclea. It's like they're actively trying to mend the brokenness.
Yes. And the significance of this deliberate seeking of divine intervention? Well, it highlights their continued faith despite everything and their desire to reestablish a righteous lineage.
They're consciously seeking a child who can in some way redeem the tragedy.
Exactly. Redeem the tragedy of Abel's death and carry forward a different kind of inheritance. And their prayer is answered with the birth of Seth.
And Seth is no ordinary child. The text describes him as exceptionally beautiful, even surpassing Adam,
Quite the description.
and his name itself carries weight. That God has heard my prayer, and also power and strength. That's a powerful combination. What's the author emphasizing by giving him such a significant name?
That dual meaning, it really encapsulates the sense of divine favor, I think, and the
Yeah.
potential for renewed and strong lineage. He's very much presented as an answer to their prayers, a symbol of hope.
A new beginning.
A new beginning, yes. And the subsequent fasting and prayer after his birth, leading to that purification ritual at a river, further underscore their commitment to raising him in righteousness.
Interestingly, after Seth's birth, Adam and Eve cease marital relations. The text specifies they had only 5 children in total: Cain, Lulua, Abel, Aclia, and Seth. That seems like a very deliberate choice.
It does.
What might it signify?
It seems to emphasize the unique and pivotal role of Seth in their eyes. It's almost as if their purpose as procreators shifts entirely. They're focusing now on nurturing this new, hopefully righteous line.
Marking a new chapter centered on spiritual inheritance rather than just physical offspring.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so Seth grows up. He's depicted as incredibly pious, dedicated to fasting and prayer. He's almost presented as a direct contrast to Cain.
A stark contrast, yes.
But the forces of temptation are still at play, aren't they? Satan tries to deceive Adam, appearing as a beautiful woman, promising finer and better children during Adam's separation from Eve. What does this particular form of temptation reveal about Satan's understanding of human desires, perhaps?
Well, it shows an understanding of vulnerability, certainly. Vulnerability during times of separation and a manipulation of the natural human desire for family, for legacy. And the disguise as a beautiful woman is, well, it's a classic tactic, isn't it? Appealing to sensory desires to lead someone astray.
But divine intervention occurs. God reveals Satan's true nature, his shapeshift abilities. Then, in this really dramatic moment, commands him to appear in his terrifying form, which understandably frightens Adam.
Right.
What's the key takeaway from this direct confrontation and revelation?
I think it serves as a powerful lesson for Adam about the true nature of evil and the importance of recognizing its deceptive guises. It reinforces God's protection and provides a stark warning against succumbing to, superficial appearances.
And remarkably, God then quells animal lust, specifically in Adam and Eve alone. This seems like a very specific grace granted only to them. Why do you think that might be?
That's interesting. It likely relates back to their original state of purity in Eden, perhaps. Maybe it's a restoration of a certain harmony within them, something lost after the fall, and it further distinguishes them from their descendants who would inherit the consequences of sin.
Okay, so later, at just 7 years old, Seth faces his own temptation.
Yes, very young.
Satan reappears, but this time as a beautiful angel of light, promising a better world with no sin, no passions, even godlike status. This is a very different approach than the one used with Adam.
It is, and it highlights Satan's adaptability, I think. He tailors his temptations to the individual's perceived weaknesses or desires. For the pious Seth, appealing to a world free of earthly struggles, closer to the divine, well, that would have been particularly enticing, you'd imagine.
But Seth shows incredible wisdom for his age. He refuses to go without his parents' permission, fearing divine punishment like Cain and, well, like Adam himself experienced. He's clearly learned from their experiences.
Absolutely. That early resistance, it signifies the strength of the values instilled in him by Adam and Eve prioritizing obedience, fearing God above the allure of even seemingly heavenly promises. It sets a really strong foundation for a righteous lineage built on adherence to divine will.
Even with Satan's persistence, Seth stands firm and seeks divine help at the altar. God curses Satan, and Adam reinforces the warning about the deceptive angel. This early victory for Seth feels crucial.
It's definitely a defining moment. It establishes Seth as resistant to Satan's deceptions and solidifies his role as the progenitor of a line that actively seeks divine guidance and protection.
So with Seth proving his integrity, Adam encourages him to marry his sister Aclia to, replenish the earth. Seth is initially hesitant, which is understandable given everything that's transpired, but he eventually obeys at age 15. What does his initial reluctance and eventual obedience reveal about the dynamics of their early society?
Well, his reluctance might stem from an awareness of the challenges, maybe the potential for sin in the world. But his obedience, that underscores the strong familial hierarchy and the respect for parental authority as divinely ordained in their view.
Right. And at 20, Seth has Enos, and subsequent generations follow, Canaan, Mahalalel. And these early descendants live near the Cave of Treasures during Adam's lifetime, maintaining that connection.
Yes, and that continued proximity is important. It symbolizes their commitment to Adam's teaching and their deliberate separation from the path taken by Cain's lineage. The Cave of Treasures acts as a physical and symbolic anchor for their identity and values.
Okay, so time passes. Adam approaches his death at 930 years old. He gathers Seth and his descendants to impart his final blessings and commandments. This feels like the passing of a really crucial torch.
It absolutely is.
What are the core principles he emphasizes?
He stresses maintaining innocence, purity, justice, unwavering trust in God, and above all, vigilance against Satan's deceptions. He's essentially laying down the foundational principles for a righteous society to endure after he's gone.
He also gives very specific instructions for his burial: embalming with myrrh, aloes, and cassia, placement in the cave of treasures with those tokens from the garden.
Yes, very specific. And then comes this remarkable prophecy about the flood and the future significance of his body.
That's extraordinary. Tell us more about that.
This prophecy, it links Adam's physical remains directly to the future of redemption. The instruction to preserve his body and its eventual placement in the middle of the earth. It suggests a deep symbolic connection to the future salvation of humankind.
And this middle of the earth is identified as the place from where God will come to save their kindred. Wow, that's powerful foreshadowing.
It really is.
He also commands Seth, again, to maintain strict separation from Cain's lineage. Why is this separation hammered home so strongly in Adam's final instructions?
Well, it's about safeguarding the purity of Seth's line, fundamentally, preventing the corrupting influence of Cain's ways from spreading. It's a directive for both spiritual and social segregation to preserve righteousness.
And then there's this other incredible prophecy about the gold, incense, and myrrh used for his burial being preserved through the flood and later offered to the Word of God made man by kings.
Astonishing, isn't it?
It connects everything right to the New Testament narrative.
It does. This prophecy weaves together the very beginning of human history with the coming of the Messiah, suggesting a divinely orchestrated plan of redemption embedded even in these early events. And the gifts themselves, they symbolize Christ's kingship, divinity, and suffering.
Adam dies on the same day he was created and left the garden. A complete cycle.
Of profound symmetry.
Seth fulfills his father's wishes, burying him with reverence in the caves of treasures. The 140 days of mourning again, just like for Abel, emphasizing the loss.
Yes, the symmetry of his life's beginning and end, marked by these divine milestones, it underscores Adam's central role as the progenitor of humanity and the weight of his legacy.
So after Adam and Eve's deaths, Seth enforces that separation. His descendants, called the children of God, live north near the Cave of Treasures, while Cain's line is to the west. The contrast between these two groups is really striking in the text.
It becomes very pronounced, yes.
What are the defining characteristics of Seth's lineage as described here?
They're portrayed as living in a state of, well, relative purity and devotion, characterized by constant praise, a close connection to the divine evidenced by their ability to hear angels, apparently, and a focus on spiritual pursuits rather than earthly labor.
They abstain from earthly work, focusing on offerings and consuming fruit from the mountain. Fasting and prayer are central, guided by the lingering scent of the garden. Their virtues, happiness, innocence, lack of negative emotions, pure language. It paints an almost Edenic picture.
It really does. It paints an ideal of a society living in close communion with God, almost untouched by the corruption that plagues Cain's descendants down below. It highlights the potential for a righteous human community when it's dedicated to divine principles.
They even have strict spiritual disciplines for their children and women, and use Adam's body for blessings and anointing. That's a very tangible link to their heritage.
Yes, that ritualistic practice, it reinforces Adam's symbolic importance as the source of their righteousness and the focal point of their spiritual identity, a constant reminder.
So Seth lives a long life, nearing his end at 912. He ensures a final blessing for his children, builds a roof over the altar, prays for God's protection against Satan, and God responds with a promise about the great 5 days and a half and the coming of his word for salvation.
Another powerful piece of foreshadowing embedded in the narrative.
Seth dies, is buried beside Adam, 40 days of mourning, and his successors, starting with Enos, continue his righteous ways, maintaining that separation.
Yeah.
This seems like a relatively stable period for Seth's line.
It represents a continuation of that initial hope embodied in Seth, a sustained effort to maintain a community grounded in faith and obedience, separate from the growing wickedness around them, for a time at least.
Right, because inevitably this purity is challenged. Cain's descendants become increasingly wicked, marked by animal lusts, robbery, murder, sin. The story of Lamech the blind accidentally killing Cain and then his own shepherd. It illustrates this descent.
It does. It shows how sin can escalate and corrupt entire communities when it's not actively resisted. The actions of Cain's descendants demonstrate a clear departure from divine principles, leading to increasing moral decay and violence. A stark contrast.
Then comes Genun, a descendant of Cain, influenced by Satan, the text says. He introduces musical instruments and strong drink.
Ah, yes, Ganon.
This leads to revelry, lust, further sin, including incest and violence. This feels like a deliberate tactic by evil to corrupt through pleasure and distraction.
Absolutely. Ginun's innovations represent a more insidious form of temptation, using cultural tools, music, drink to undermine morality and create an environment where sin just flourishes. It's a potent reminder that even seemingly harmless advancements can be used for corrupting purposes.
Yeah, and Genun actively tries to lure Seth's descendants down from the holy mountain with these enticements. Music, beautiful women, fine clothing.
A targeted campaign.
Initially, the children of God, called angels, because of their righteousness, they resist, but gradually they weaken. They relax their fasting and prayer, become captivated by the sights and sounds below. Satan even tricks them, creating beautiful apparitions, showing them a path down using a water stream. It really highlights the seductive nature of temptation, doesn't it?
It shows that gradual erosion of spiritual discipline, the power of worldly allurements to distract from higher values. Even those initially strong in their faith, like Seth's descendants were portrayed, can be led astray by persistent temptation if they let their guard down.
Jared, the leader at the time, warns against this fraternization. He invokes their righteous ancestors, Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, and the danger of becoming children of the devil.
Strong words.
But his warnings are ignored. And once they descend and succumb to lust with Cain's daughters, the text says the fire of the holy mountain prevents their return. This feels like a point of no return.
It really does. It underscores the serious consequences of disobedience and the idea that certain spiritual boundaries, once crossed, can have irreversible effects. Their inability to return symbolizes their spiritual fall from grace. God is angered. Jared is heartbroken.
So Jared, seeing his children fall, instructs his remaining righteous descendants, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah, not to descend.
The faithful remnant.
He prophesies their departure to a strange land, saying they'll never return to the holy mountain. And he commands them to take Adam's body and the gold, incense, and myrrh with them.
Passing on Adam's final instructions.
Noah is specifically tasked with taking Adam's body in the ark during the flood, and his son Shem will eventually place it in the middle of the earth, the place of salvation. Enoch is told to remain in the cave and minister before Adam's body. These are profound instructions for the future.
Absolutely. Jared's final instructions are pivotal. They're about preserving the righteous lineage and ensuring the fulfillment of that prophecy regarding Adam's body. He designates Noah as the key figure in the coming judgment and the continuation of hope.
Jared dies, mourned by the righteous few. Enoch continues his ministry in the cave, experiencing wonders, writing a celebrated book according to this text.
Yes, the Enoch traditions are fascinating in themselves.
But more of Seth's descendants keep straying, causing sorrow for Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. Enoch becomes aware of the coming flood and prophecies that they are the last rulers on the holy mountain.
The end of an era.
His final commandments are to hold fast to the fear and service of God. And then, Enoch is translated by God to the land of life, paradise, a light beyond this world.
A remarkable end for him. Enoch's translation signifies divine favor for that unwavering righteousness, and it definitely foreshadows the impending judgment upon the rest of humanity. The departure of the righteous leaves the holy mountain vulnerable.
And only Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah remain on the holy mountain. The rest have fallen into sin with Cain's descendants and are forbidden to return.
A tragic dwindling of the righteous line before the flood.
So, to summarize this deep dive then, the second book of Adam and Eve paints this really powerful picture, this stark contrast between the lineage of Seth, marked by its initial righteousness, its struggles, and eventual, widespread fall, and the consistently corrupted line of Cain.
The divergence is key.
We see the constant battle against Satan's deceptions, the critical importance of obedience to divine commands, and all this fascinating foreshadowing of major events like the flood, and even the coming of the Messiah woven throughout.
Ultimately, I think this ancient text explores those enduring themes. The struggle between good and evil within humanity, the serious consequences of straying from divine principles, and yet also that persistent thread of hope for redemption, which is deeply connected to the legacy of Adam himself.
On that profound note, maybe something for you to consider is the enduring power of these early narratives, how they might have shaped and perhaps continue to shape our understanding of human nature, temptation, and the promise of salvation across different cultures and religions. What key insight from this deep dive into the second book of Adam and Eve will you carry with you? Definitely something to contemplate.